the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another one of my semi-regular broadcasts of my podcast, which is What's the Biggs Idea? I'm Andy Biggs, Congressman from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. I'm on my Independence Day tie, and so I say Happy Independence Day to everyone who's watching, and hope you have a safe and happy Independence Day celebration tomorrow. I am so pleased to be joined today by just a dynamic gentleman. His name is Mike Davis. Mike is a former chief counsel for nominations to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley. And I've got some funny stories about Senator Grassley that I could actually share with you, Mike, and I'm sure you can share some with me. He's quite a character. He does a great job in the Senate. Mike is also the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, which defends constitutional judges and the rule of law. And you can't have freedom, in my opinion, without the rule of law. He also leads the Internet Accountability Project, which is an advocacy organization fighting to rein in big tech. Mike has served in all 3 branches of the federal government, including former President George W. Bush, the Justice Department, House Speaker Newt Gingrich, and current Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Mike, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate you being on today.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
So this is a great day. It's serendipity almost that we're getting to talk so soon after the Trump v. U.S. Decision came out. I contextually, just for folks who aren't paying attention, this is the question on presidential immunity. I think the opinion was correctly written and drawn. I think it was correctly reasoned, and quite frankly, it makes presidential immunity look quite honestly a lot like qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, which seems that maybe that's an imperfect analogy, but that's what it looks like to me. But I thought Justice Sotomayor did a tremendous disservice and probably wrote the most reckless opinion by any justice of the Supreme Court in the history of the country. I mean, folks could argue Dred Scott maybe, but let's be real about what's going on. So, Mike, walk us through it, the decision, the parameters of the majority opinion, the ramifications of Justice Sotomayor's dissenting opinion, and I just want to hear your opinion and also your explication of the case.
Yeah, so it was a 6-3 opinion written by the Chief Justice and joined by the 5 other Republican-appointed justices. The 3 liberals wrote a dissent. The majority held that the president of the United States, any president of the United States, is immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts, not his private misconduct, his official acts. And if the Supreme Court did not hold the way that it held, we would see presidents going forward indicting and prosecuting their predecessors for their official acts, and you would destroy the country because you would destroy the presidency. And let me give you an example. If Joe Biden's actually the biggest winner out of this Supreme Court ruling.
Agreed.
Because after his disastrous debate performance, he's not going to be the president on January 20th, 2025. He may not even be the Democrat nominee. It looks like Kamala and her, the vultures around her are circling Joe Biden right now. But I would say this: does Joe Biden want the Trump 47 Justice Department prosecuting him for his illegal mass parole of over 10 million illegal immigrants into our country and the resulting kidnappings and rapes and murders and other violent crimes? Does President Obama want the Trump 47 Justice Department prosecuting him for his extrajudicial drone strike on 2 American citizens, including a minor? Does President George W. Bush want the Trump 47 Justice Department prosecuting him for lying about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and the resulting hundreds of thousands of deaths? I think the Chief Justice, who's certainly no MAGA supporter, I've never seen him wear a MAGA hat, properly understood that this decision is so much bigger than Donald Trump. It's so much bigger than one election. It's so much bigger than one president. If you can indict your predecessor as the president of the United States, our country is over. This is how the Roman Republic fell. It was the lawfare by the Senate insiders that caused Caesar to cross the Rubicon from Gaul into Rome, and it led to the Civil War and the fall of the Roman Republic. And I'm not saying we're heading into a civil war, but if you destroy our presidency with this lawfare, with this election interference, you're going to destroy our country.
Yes, it's very interesting. That's a great summation of what went on there. There's some other aspects to this case that I think are actually critical. So the left has totally lost its mind because I just find myself saying, did you not read the opinion? Did you not read the majority opinion? Because when you read the majority opinion, I thought they kind of struck the exact right tone, because they're protected for official acts, constitutionally authorized official acts, or statutorily authorized official acts. When they act in their own personal capacity beyond and outside the scope of the Constitution and the law, no protection. So this notion from the left is really bizarre. And what it was is, you've got a DOJ attorney that actually argued that you could take out a political opponent with SEAL Team 6 and that you'd be given immunity based on the Trump argument. And of course that's wrong. But then it was parroted by Justice Sotomayor. And now it's been out there by all these crazy total left-wing media hacks who don't understand the law, don't read the law. And so comment on Justice Sotomayor's opinion and the ramifications of that, Mike.
So I clerked for Justice Gorsuch. I think Justice Sotomayor is actually personally a lovely old lady. She reminds me of one of my crazy liberal aunts who I know I'm going to go to Christmas and I'm going to fight with this liberal aunt about politics. And I don't think that she's very smart, and I'm going to have to fight with her for 3 hours at the dinner, but I still love her, right? I feel the same way about Sotomayor, right? She's not a very smart liberal, but I still love her. But her opinion, as you said, Congressman, was just over the top reckless. It was just stupidity, and the fact that the left is running with it is insane. The Supreme Court held very clearly this: if the president is acting within his core constitutional powers, he is absolutely immune. If he is acting within his statutory powers, he is presumptively immune. And if he's acting in his personal capacity, he's not immune. So if he's in his statutory powers, then it is rebuttable. The prosecutor can come forward with evidence to show that he was not acting he was not performing an executive function as the president of the United States, so he should not get immunity. This is the same framework that they use for members of Congress for the speech or debate clause, right? So you have members of Congress who have legislative immunity for their official acts, both civilly and criminally. You have federal judges who have immunity for their official acts, both civilly and criminally. The president had civil immunity because of the Nixon versus Fitzgerald case 40 years ago. That just got extended to the criminal context now and the reason it had to take so long is because in our 250 years, we've never had a former president indicted. The fault is with Joe Biden and Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco and Jack Smith and Jay Bratt and Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis and Nathan Wade and these other Biden Democrat prosecutors and judges and operatives who have politicized and weaponized our justice systems at every level to destroy their political enemies. They wanted to bankrupt Trump. They want to throw him in prison for the rest of his life. They want to simply take him off the ballot because they fear American voters on November 5th, 2024. They know American voters are going to vote for Trump and not Biden. So the people who are pretending like they're protecting democracy are actually destroying democracy. And when you have a 6-3 decision like this, where you get even the Chief Justice of the United States firmly in your camp, and not only firmly in your camp, but writing the majority opinion. This is the Chief Justice who has been openly critical of President Trump over the years. And he sees very clearly, he's woke now to this Biden Democrat lawfare and election interference. And this presidential immunity case, and we can talk about this more, Congressman, this is going to gut all of these other cases against President Trump.
Yeah, and I'm going to want to touch on that for just a second, because let's set the context. So, and because I do want to get back to Justice Thomas's concurring opinion, because I think that what he said is absolutely correct. I wish that were adopted as well as part of the majority opinion, but it was not. In my opinion, it wasn't really part of the case, and so it would have been outside of the scope of the opinion that needed to be dealt with. Even though the Trump team argued it, but here's the question for you: just the context of lawfare. We see that with everything from, I mean, you got Steve Bannon, who's a voice, and we could get into that case, which is really bizarro in my opinion, because the illegitimate J6 committee, but he's going to jail. In the meantime, Merrick Garland, who's basically thumbed his nose at our subpoena and refuses to give us the audio recording, which I believe the case law is pretty clear that when you alter the transcript, and they've admitted they altered the transcript, although they say it's de minimis and inconsequential. How would we know that unless we had the audio, right? I mean, that's why the audio now becomes actually more potent after they admitted they altered the transcript. So I'm wandering around a little bit, but it's just to indicate the lawfare that's out there, and you touched on that. So with Trump being the victim of this because of the Bragg case, the Willis case, the Jack Smith efforts. Tell us a little bit what the immunity case plus maybe the J6 case that came down, what those might do to those cases.
So the Fisher case was the first one that dropped, and the Supreme Court held that the Biden Justice Department essentially contorted, politicized, and weaponized a post-Enron obstruction of justice statute intended to go after the destruction of evidence in a corporate fraud setting. And the Biden Justice Department used that to go after Trump and his supporters on January 6th, right? And I would say this about January 6th. January 6th was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. It was not an insurrection.
Exactly.
No one's been charged with insurrection because no evidence exists. And look, I ran the Kavanaugh confirmation proceedings, the peaceful transfer of power at the Supreme Court, and there were many people who interrupted our proceedings. They trespassed, they threatened senators, they threatened staff, and not a damn thing happened to them. And I think that if you're not going to apply equally our criminal laws to people with whom you disagree versus with whom you agree, that's selective prosecution. That's political persecution. And it's unacceptable. What should have happened on January 6th, just like what should have happened with BLM and Antifa and Hamas supporters and abortion industry activists and trans terrorists, is there are three categories of people who were there that day. There were people who were there who were peacefully and they were outside. And even if you think they were wrong, even if you think they were crazy, they have an absolute First Amendment right to be there. Then there are people who trespass, and you should charge them with trespass. And then there are people who were violent, and you should charge them more severely. But again, you can't charge Trump people and not charge Biden people, right? It's just not acceptable under our judicial system. And what made it worse is Biden dusted off, contorted this post-Enron statute with severe penalties, a felony statute with severe penalties to go after real Americans and real America who trespassed and took selfies on the Senate floor on January 6th. Give me a damn break. There were a lot of bad actors on January 6th, but not nearly as bad as the BLM and Antifa people who caused a hell of a lot more damage, destruction, and death than the January 6th supporters. And so the Supreme Court in the Fisher case is going to reverse all those criminal convictions under 18 USC 1512 obstruction of
C1,
official,
yeah.
which is huge. That's two of the four charges against President Trump in the January 6th case. And then with this presidential immunity, a lot of that case is going to go away. Jack Smith's going to have probably 15 or 20% of his case left after this is all done. And are you really going to go to trial on 15 or 20% when even that 15 or 20% is going to get reversed on appeal? Because guess what? It's not illegal to object to a presidential election. It's allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. Democrats objected to Republican wins in 1968, 2000, 2004, and 2016. We don't see Al Gore and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton in jail for that. And it's also allowed by the First Amendment to object. So these are monumental cases. These cases really are a stake in the heart of this Biden Democrat lawfare and election interference. And President Trump's going to be back in office. And I hope that his Justice Department opens a criminal probe for this obvious criminal conspiracy against rights under 18 USC section 241 and 242, because they must face severe legal, political, and financial consequences. As they say, Congressman, nobody's above the law.
Yeah, I mean, they're happy to say that until the law gets turned on them. And it's just interesting. I mean, your explanation is really great. I love it because I've been trying to say it. I have not been able to say it as succinctly and as clearly and cogently as you just did. The Fisher case was really important, but I mean, and the immunity case is massive as well. I mean, I'd love to take a moment and talk about the emasculation and overturning of Chevron, but we won't get there because that's kind of off our topic of lawfare and what's going to go on with that. We didn't get into this as much as I wanted to get into it. Sotomayor's opinion, in my view of the things, is causing potential violence to take place. I mean, this is what's bizarre about this. The left always says, well, Trump and his rhetoric's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. Here's the deal. You have a Supreme Court justice basically tacitly suggesting that a chief executive, the president of the United States, can actually engage in violence against political opponents and have immunity. To me, that is so dangerous and reckless, especially to not just to Donald Trump and his followers who are political enemies to the Biden administration, but also to the Supreme Court justices in the majority. And by the way, I thought Chief Justice Roberts addressed her down, Justice Sotomayor down pretty well in his majority opinion. But I wanted to get your take on that, since you're familiar with the justices. I've only met some of them in passing. I wanted to know what your thoughts are, because you've seen the need for security at the Supreme Court, and I do believe this probably puts them in graver danger than they should have been.
I would say to Sonia Sotomayor, where the hell in the Constitution does the president have the right to assassinate his political enemies? Where is that power in the Constitution? It's not in there, Sonia. Where in federal statute does the president have the power to assassinate his political enemies? It's not in there, Sonia. So, Sonia, that's just absolutely idiotic and reckless that you're saying that the president of the United States has immunity if he assassinates his political enemy. It's dangerous, like you said, Congressman, and she should stop doing that. If she had any shame, she would feel shame for putting that in there, because now you see these Biden operatives parroting that talking point. And like you said, it is dangerous, right? And so it's absolutely insane. It's baseless. It's wrong. I don't even think that Sonia Sotomayor is dumb enough to believe it. So that shows you there's a little bit of maliciousness in what she said.
Okay, so let's get on to one last part about the Trump v. U.S. case, and that was Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion. He raised the issue of whether Jack Smith, for instance, who is a private citizen and has not been appointed by Congress, nor delegated any authority by Congress and approved as a special counsel per the Constitution, he has no authority to prosecute anyone. What did you think about his concurring opinion?
He's correct, and I think that President Trump should file motions to dismiss on that very grounds. Remember, under our Constitution, there are constitutional officers, and then there are officers created by Congress through statutes. And you can only exercise power in the executive branch through officers, constitutional officers or statutory officers. And so if you want to prosecute, for example, we have what is it, 94 U.S. attorneys around the country who are nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate. Those are statutory officers. And then you have assistant United States attorneys who work for those United States attorneys, who work for those constitutional officers. And they can do that. Those AUSAs, assistant U.S. attorneys, can do that because they're managed on a day-to-day basis by a statutory officer, by a United States attorney. Jack Smith, if you look at his office, the Office of Special Counsel, is not created by statute. It's actually created by Department of Justice regulation after Congress let the independent counsel statute lapse after Ken Starr. And so then you have to ask, if this Jack Smith is not an officer of the United States, he must report to an officer. He directly reports to the Attorney General of the United States or the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And the problem is they don't supervise him on a day-to-day basis. Actually, the regulations make it where they can't supervise him on a day-to-day basis. And so therefore, his office is unconstitutional and it should be struck down. And these indictments by Jack Smith should be thrown out. The grand jury proceedings should be thrown out. And if they want to bring in an assistant U.S. attorney or someone else who reports to a constitutional officer on a day-to-day basis to bring these charges, go for it. But this is unconstitutional, what Jack Smith has done.
And to that end, Mike, myself and others have tried to defund Jack Smith because we view his position as unconstitutionally formed. And I think that's one of the great checks that the founders gave to the legislative branch, is to actually defund, because we control the purse, specifically the House of Representatives. And so when we see that type of thing going on, we definitely should be, in my opinion, defunding that. So that would be a way to resolve some of that. I want to, before we run out of time, this is a shift in gears, and yet it's related. You are head of something called the Internet Accountability Project. Tell us what that is. Tell us why it's necessary.
The Internet Accountability Project is the sister organization to the Article 3 Project. The Article 3 Project does judges and lawfare. The Internet Accountability Project, our sole mission is to hold big tech accountable. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, these trillion-dollar big tech monopolists that control information and commerce in our country. And what we want to do is break them up. We want to do that by updating and enforcing our century-old antitrust laws to target these anti-competitive tumors on our free market, particularly Google and Apple, who are the worst ones. And you do that through targeting these tumors. It's targeted law enforcement. It is the opposite of regulation. These big tech platforms want regulation because they're entry barriers to startup competitors. We also want Section 230 reform, but we're seeing with these court rulings, it's going to be very hard to hold big tech accountable through Section 230. So I think our focus is breaking up big tech with our antitrust laws.
Yeah, the great point. I actually, when you first started, I jotted down 230. I wanted to be reminded myself to talk about that. With Section 230, just for folks who don't understand what that is, if you're a platform, then you're given this immunity, and so for me, it's too broad. And the idea was because it was a nascent industry, they wanted to protect and ostensibly what was going to be a town square type of format. But when you start censoring, I view that as publishing/editing, and you should no longer have those protections. And I'm with you. I would like to see 230 be gone, but it won't be gone. So we're going to have to deal with that. I also find intriguing the antitrust angle that you're working on. Are you talking about antitrust enforcement similar to what we saw in the AT&T cases, where this monolithic AT&T which was crowding out everybody else. And as soon as anybody started even doing things like manufacturing different kind of phones, they got into that and competed and forced everybody out. Are you talking about breaking up these so-called, let's just call them big tech companies, and how would that look like? What would that look like?
I would say this: if Google competed against YouTube instead of acquired YouTube, they would be competing for users, and it's much less likely they would be censoring conservatives and others with whom they disagree. And so that's just a good example. We have Facebook and Instagram, same thing there, right? These trillion-dollar big tech companies are monopolists. They use their monopoly power to crush competition, shutter small businesses, and cancel conservatives. And that's unacceptable. They can't continue to have this gatekeeping power over information and commerce. And you see a bipartisan coalition of politicians working together to break up these trillion-dollar big tech monopolists. You have the populist wing of the Democrat Party teaming up with the populist wing of the Republican Party to do this, and I'm fully on board.
Yeah, and I think you'll see that there were some efforts in the Judiciary Committee that I sit on, and hopefully in the House Judiciary Committee. Now, hopefully we'll see something going forward. I don't anticipate anything before the next Congress, but I think we should be laying the groundwork. I hope we are laying the groundwork to do something major with the antitrust once President Trump becomes the president, and we hopefully get a majority back in the Senate and in the House. So, Mike, this has been interesting, but before we go, I want to get one last comment going back to the lawfare. Where do you see that now from the left, and what do you see is the short-term remedy and long-term outlook before we go? And we've got about 2 minutes left.
I think that this lawfare, after this presidential immunity and Fisher case, I think this lawfare is toast. It's the Biden Democrat house of cards is going to crumble. You're seeing this even in the New York case where they're delaying the sentencing because they know, this Judge Merchan knows that he used evidence that was subject to presidential immunity as part of the trial. They used President Trump's conversations with two of his top White House advisors. That is explicitly disallowed by the presidential immunity case. There's going to be a mistrial there. These two January 6th cases are toast, and the presidential records case down in Mar-a-Lago is not going to get resolved before the election. Trump is going to win on November 5th, and on January 20th, his acting attorney general should dismiss all these federal cases on day one.
Yeah, that's a great synopsis. I feel like everybody could learn so much from listening to Mike Davis. If you're interested, how do people follow you on social media, Mike?
Article3project.org, article number 3project.org. You can take action there. You can follow us on social media. You can donate. And thank you very much, Congressman.
Yeah, Mike, it's been great. I hope you have a great 4th of July with your family and friends and safe. And I wish that for everybody in the country tomorrow, that it's a really happy celebration. You can follow me, folks, on social media at @RepAndyBiggsAZ. You can go to me on Rumble at @RepAndyBiggs, and you can also get me at www.biggs.house.gov. I'm grateful to my friend Mike Davis, who's given us so much information. I look forward to working with him in the future. And God bless you all, and have a wonderful, wonderful 4th of July.